Welcome to Coffee Talk, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial.
I'm your host, Justin Mullen, where industry executives talk leadership, culture, and commercial real estate. Grab your coffee and let's talk business. Welcome back to Coffee Talk. I am Justin Mullen, and I'm sitting here today with Mitesh Kothari. Doing it a little bit different today, Mitesh. Previous guests that I've had, I've known for many years and worked with off and on for many years. And in addition to kind of just getting to know each other a little bit, you're the first Hyatt Commercial team member that we've had on as a guest. And I'm excited for that because you've got such a unique background and are bringing kind of a really interesting take on real estate, whichever, as our listeners know, that's not always the primary focus of this talk. It's really to talk to really interesting leaders and people that have built businesses. And we'll get into some of that. But one of our listeners had a great idea. One of our kind of something that we repeat on every podcast is asking what I think to be a little bit of a challenging question if you're put on the spot, but I'll go ahead and start with it today. One of the things I find really interesting, again, is leadership style. And so I ask all of our guests, if you had to describe your leadership style in one word or a couple of words, what would it be?
Well, it's not something you think about too often, but I guess I would describe it as empowering. And what I mean by that is I think you have to identify good talent. And once you've identified them, you want to put them in positions to succeed. I do that with my own family, my own children. I certainly do it with my managers and the folks that work for me. But you put them in a position, you don't want them to always come to you with every question. You want to give them some authority to lead. And I think that if you tell them it's okay to make mistakes, you'll learn from them and you'll get better. I'm not going to give you a hard time if you make a mistake, but go ahead and take the risk to make a decision and make that decision. And you'll either know that you made the right decision or you'll learn from it and not make that mistake again. And I would say that my managers really feel empowered to go out there and lead. And what that does is it tells the folks that report to them that they should report to them, not me. You can't lead a large organization if all of the employees feel like they have to go to the CEO or to the owner or to the principal, or in the case of medical practice, the partner. I can't have 100 people coming up to me every day. I really need to have the clinical people go to their clinical manager and the business people to go to the business manager and so forth and so on. And then the practice administrator has to be the one that all the managers lead to. So we created a hierarchy, but everyone within their positions have the authority to lead with my backing. And even when they make a mistake, they have my backing.
That's a fantastic answer. Each time I ask that, I'm a little bit surprised because I really don't get into that discussion with you beforehand because I want it to be very free flowing when we talk about it. That's a fantastic answer. Empowering is a fantastic word to use to describe leadership. Certainly as somebody that's trying to build a substantial company right now, that's something that we talk about regularly and making sure we have the infrastructure in place to grow. Because to your point, one person can't lead a massive team. You've got to create new leaders. And with that, let me now introduce you as with Hyatt Commercial, your role is as a healthcare and medical practice consultant. And we don't need to necessarily dive into super details of what that means, but what I'd like you to do now is kind of introduce yourself professionally and give the listeners an understanding of what your background is and kind of how you've gotten to this role now.
Okay, I'm Dr. Mitesh Kothari. I'll start from the beginning. My parents, I moved here in 1974. I was 4 years old. I remember one of my earliest memories is my parents introducing me to their friends as, "Hi, this is our son. He's going to be a doctor." And I was 5 years old. And I kind of went along with it because, as a kid, you sort of want to make your parents happy. And it was pretty clear to me that my parents would be happy if I was a physician. You can say the stereotype, a lot of Asians come to America and they want their kids to be professionals. And I used to kind of resent that because, I didn't get to choose my own path. I kind of felt like my path was chosen for me. But as I got older, I realized why. And it's something you don't realize when you're a kid is what goes through your parents' minds. Now that I'm a parent, I understand. They've made a huge sacrifice to come to this country. And they left their family and their friends and everything they knew for a better life.
Yeah.
Not for themselves, but certainly for me. And what they didn't want to see is all that was for nothing.
Yeah.
And by asking your kids to become professionals and achieve higher education, the odds of them failing is a lot lower. I don't know any physician that got a medical degree that went bankrupt or is homeless. They just generally do well. Some do better than others. But the point is, it's sort of a near guaranteed path to some level of success. In other words, my parents didn't do all this for nothing. And so I do understand why they did that. But anyway, nonetheless, I grew up in Hagerstown, Maryland, where my dad was able to secure a job as a civil engineer, and a small town. And sometimes you can be a big fish in a small town. You can't be a big fish in a big town as easily. So Hagerstown, in that respect, was kind of ideal for me. But, I've talked to a lot of people about just how lucky I was in a lot of ways. And one of the things in my life that really led to my success was the fact that I ended up being drawn to a small town, because you can grow a business with less competition in a small town. Anyway, that's one of the many things that I didn't choose that just luckily happened to me.
And that's something I'd like to come back to, because I do think as a parent of young kids right now, we're always questioning ourselves, how hard do you push somebody into, whether it's a sport or an academic or an instrument or whatever it may be. I'd love to get your thoughts on your kids now who are progressing in their own careers, but take us to the start. You get through medical school and now you're out and you want to become a physician, and
I'll take one step back, because this is a really important step. I went to University of Maryland, College Park, and graduated. I started out as a science major, like a lot of people want to go to medical school. And chemistry was my major because I loved my chemistry teacher in high school, and she was fantastic and made it interesting. I got to college and realized, man, chemistry is boring and it's kind of hard. Didn't want to do this. And so I switched to biology, because biology to me was just rote memorization, which I was really good at. And then halfway through the second year, I realized, what if I don't get into medical school and I have a degree in biology? There's nothing that you can do with a biology degree that interests me whatsoever. So I switched to business and took a lot of business classes and really was interested in that. So that was part of my background that I maybe plays forward to some of my success in the future.
Definitively, that's why you're sitting here today. I think if you were just a one-man practice and were fantastic at it, that'd be a great lifestyle, and I'm sure you would have enjoyed it to a certain degree, but you're here as a business leader now.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So then I went to medical school because, again, I'm just following the path that was set for me and the path I always just felt I was supposed to do. But medical school is a whole nother level of difficult. And in the first semester of medical school, I really had a come to Jesus moment. It was, I don't want to be a doctor. I never really wanted to be a doctor. What am I doing here? Actually kind of called my parents, said, I don't want to be a doctor. And of course they were alarmed. Like, what the heck? This is the first we're hearing about this. They came to Baltimore, where I was going to medical school, and they sat down with me and we had a long talk. And in the end, like good parents, they said, look, we love you. We support you. Whatever you want to do, let us know. We'll support you. And so I had to do some soul searching. And in the end, I think I had to go back, and I actually mentor a lot of younger kids now. And I tell them, figure out what you want to be. And I don't mean profession. I mean, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a husband? Do you want to be a father? Do you want to be a traveler? What do you want to be? What defines you, not your career? Because most of us, I will tell you, you shouldn't let your career be your definition. There are greater things in my mind. And so figure out where it is you want to be in life, and then figure out how best to get there. And that's what I started doing. And I said, okay, well, I know I want to make money. I grew up with not a lot of money. My parents were immigrants here. We never really made it. Everyone around me seemed to have more money than me. And I wanted to have money. And so that was one of my things. I wanted to marry the girl of my dreams. I wanted to have a family. And so what was the best path to get there? Well, at the moment, I decided the best path to get there is to finish medical school. I'm already here. I already achieved something a lot of people can't achieve. I could go back and get a different degree. I can go back and get a different job. But the truth is, the best path to the life I want is probably to be a doctor. Well, and so I ended up being a doctor.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you could come to that realization at the time, because, for me, I look back on my journey to getting into real estate, and I kind of passed up a couple of things along the way that I look back on, and it was simply because I wasn't certain with what I wanted to be. I grew up and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what the heck that meant.
Yeah.
And I grew up at the time, it meant be a paper boy, cut people's grass, paint houses. And even like painting houses, when I first got out of college, my plan was to go to law school. I wasn't going to become an attorney. I was going to figure out how to use that to become something else similar to what you felt. And I passed up building a painting business because to me, it wasn't entrepreneurial. Looking back on it, I probably have sold that painting business twice by now and been much more better off. And my family were accountants. And so my dad didn't push me into it, but certainly would like to have seen me come into the family business. And I remember going to them, he and my aunt, and saying, I'd like to come in, I'll get my accounting, I'll get my CPA, but I want to be in business development. And they looked at me and they said, we don't need business development. We need people to sit at their desk and do tax returns for 10 hours a day, 4 months a year. And again, looking back on it, would have been an amazing opportunity over time to become an entrepreneur, lead a business. But in my mind, that wasn't entrepreneurial enough for me. But to be able to recognize it at the age you did, that you can turn this expertise into also a business opportunity is awesome.
Well, I think that if I could go back and I had that realization when I was in college, I probably never would have went to med school. But once you're already in medical school, the best path forward was probably to continue. But I think what you're talking about is sitting at a desk for 10 hours. That doesn't excite a true entrepreneur.
Right.
And you can make a great living.
Right.
You can be financially successful, but that doesn't really excite a true entrepreneur. And in the end, I think back to little things like mowing people's lawns and selling ice cream cones and paper routes and all the things that we classically talk about. But I recognized in middle school that school lunches in Washington County, Maryland, were 90 cents. And almost everybody got $1. And so I knew I had a school full of people that had 10 cents in their pocket. And I basically designed almost every gimmick I could to get that 10 cents out of their pocket into mine. And I don't want to get into all the things I did to do, but I was very successful at it. But people would say to me, yeah, I recognize you. You're going to be an entrepreneur. You're going to own a business someday. And that's always something that I didn't think about when I was young, but people could see that in you, that spirit you have, and you have it and I have it.
I was going to say, that is a feeling that we all have, that maybe not all of us, but that we come across quite frequently in these conversations. I used to sell airheads and blow pops for 25 cents. And I could buy a box of them. The school didn't
Welcome to
appreciate
Coffee
that at a
Talk,
certain point.
brought to you by Hyatt Commercial.
I'm your host, Justin Mullen. We're industry
Well, now
executives,
keep going.
talk
So you start
leadership,
your own
culture,
practice. You
and
get out of
commercial
school.
real
You
estate.
now got a business
Grab your
degree,
coffee,
and you're
and
now
let's talk
finishing
business.
medical school.
I finished medical school at the University of Maryland, and along the way, found the girl of my dreams. And so she lives in Baltimore. And so I kind of rearranged my priorities to stay in Baltimore for training. And I trained at the University of Maryland Department of OBGYN and became an obstetric gynecologist. I can get into a whole story of why I chose it, but basically young, healthy people, not a lot of death, and some really exciting stuff that happens along the way. And you get to be a really big part of people's lives. And so I did enjoy that part of things. So that's why I chose OBGYN. At the time I was graduating, my wife was from Boulder, Colorado originally, and wanted to get back to Boulder, which is one of the best places in the country. If you've ever been there, if you haven't, go. It's awesome. And I wanted to go back with her. Sounds like a great life. But my mom was ill, and I just couldn't stand being too far from her because I get calls periodically. I'm going to the hospital. I don't feel well. And during residency, I couldn't go. I'm like, I'm on call, Mom. I'm sorry, I can't leave the hospital. So I didn't want to do that anymore. So I said to my wife, I said, can we go back and help take care of my parents? And luckily she said yes. I don't think she was thrilled about it, but it turned out to be a great life.
Part of the luck that you and I were talking about before we started.
So, yeah, I mean,
and the right partner in life, and somebody that's willing to accept some of those.
Yeah. So my mom did pass away a couple of years after I moved back, and we entertained the idea of leaving, but my practices started to get successful. And I said, we'd be leaving this behind. And then we looked into the average salaries of OBGYNs in Boulder, which was about a third of what I was making at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, well, we'll go back to Boulder, but we're not going to be living a super great life because physicians are a dime a dozen in Boulder, or they're not a dime a dozen. Supply demand. Hagerstown needs them. Boulder doesn't. Boulder's got all the highly educated professionals that they need because it's a great place to live. Anyway, long story short, we ended up staying in Hagerstown. I ended up being able to grow a practice that I started in 1999. I literally hired a secretary and nurse through an ad in the back of the paper, which is what you did back then in 1999. There was no internet, minimal internet at the time, I guess, especially in medicine. We're late adopters in medicine. And so it was just the three of us, and got really busy and decided I was just going to continue to take on new patients. And I didn't want to be like a practice, the typical practice that said, hey, we're going to stop taking new patients because we're too busy. I said, I'm just going to keep taking new patients. And then when I get to a point where I can't handle it anymore, I'll hire another person. And we did. We hired another person. And then I supervised that person and make sure that they were doing things with the quality that I expect from my patients. And when she got full, I hired another person. And
Let me stop you there for a second. Did you immediately focus on the business side of your practice, or were you so hyper-focused on providing great care to your patients that you grew because you had to grow? With any insight there?
Interestingly enough, I think I had to pay attention to the business because I started it from scratch. And almost no one that graduates from medical school starts a business from scratch. But my only opportunities to go to Hagerstown were to join groups that didn't give me the opportunities I wanted, whether vis-a-vis ownership or partnership, or to join the hospital as an employee, which of course wouldn't give me the entrepreneurial spirit that I wanted. So I did decide to start my own practice, had to support a local bank, thank God, who really funded all of that. But I had to pay attention to the business because there was no one else to pay attention to the business. It was my business. I pay the bills. I saw the checks that came in every day. I personally interviewed every single hire and so forth in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I had no choice but to pay attention to the business. Another good tenet is my dad always told me, hey, listen, you don't have to be an accountant. You just have to have a good accountant. You don't need to know the law. You just need to have a good lawyer. And so early on, put together a good team of professionals. And I asked a lot of questions, and you can learn an awful lot by asking good professionals the right questions.
Yeah, I think, again, one of the common threads that I see when I talk to people like this is that you've got an expertise as a medical practitioner, but you also took the time to become a generalist, a lot of other things, I'm guessing, accounting, law, things that you're never going to be the expert on, but you're smart enough to know I need to hire that person. But you've got a high level understanding, I'm sure, of how those things need to work together.
Yeah, I could never have gotten to where I am without the experts that I was able to hire, and I consider part of my team.
Yeah.
But any good business person should know that. You can't do everything. You can't be good at everything.
All right. So you go from single doctor practice to how many doctors did you get up to when it was just your team? And then tell us where it went from there with private equity and beyond that.
So I want to give a shout out to one of the big accelerators of my growth was in 2003. I joined with two partners. They were a different practice at the time. We merged our practices. Ended up being a fantastic partnership. And I'll say that was lucky too. I just happened to run into two individuals that were similarly minded, who respected me for what I wanted to do, and I respected them for what they wanted to do. And we were very successful together. But then the three physicians, along with some physician assistants, nurse practitioners, eventually midwives, we grew to 26 providers, 8 doctors, 10 midwives, and I believe 6 to 8 nurse practitioners at various times in Hagerstown, Maryland.
I was going to say, in a small town.
And one of the things that we were told eventually when the practice got purchased by private equity was, to their knowledge, we were the largest single site. And the important thing about single site is there are a lot of practices that have 3 or 4 locations. But when you have one location, you can concentrate your ancillary services in that location. For example, a mammogram machine. We decided we had such good volume that we could actually do mammograms along with annual checkups. But we didn't want to compromise. So we got the latest technology, the best machine. We contracted with fellowship-trained breast radiologists to read our film so that our patients didn't have a decrease in quality, but they had an increase in accessibility because they didn't have to have a separate appointment. And so by doing that, we're very successful. But the machine's $600,000, and the technologists you have to hire to do the films and so forth are 6-figure salaries as well, in addition to insurance and all the other things that you have to do. So the reality is most practices can't do that, but because we had volume, we could. But if you have 3 locations, you have to buy 3 of those machines. That's $600,000 a piece. You can't do it.
And coming back to the empower and description of your leadership style, and then digging into the culture side, which is something I definitely want. As you grew, how did you maintain that culture? And one of the things that a lot of people come to realize is when you open new locations for a certain business, it becomes harder to control culture. So I'm sure that was, whether it was by design or not, you definitely had a lot better chance to keep your culture in place, I would think.
Well, that's true. And as far as culture building, I think it's really important. And we stress that at our management meetings. But, you have to have the people that are directly reporting to you have the same mindset about the culture of the business as you have. And then they have to sort of portray that same culture to the folks that they report to them and so forth. And so in the end, I said, look, we want this to be the kind of practice that we're proud of, that we want our family members and friends and neighbors to come to. And they should be treated like they're our family. I know it sounds very cliche. I mean, there's a lot of things in business that's just very simple. Just got to treat people like, everything you need to know, you learn by kindergarten type idea.
Right.
It's really true. But if you treat everybody like their family, and I always said to myself, again, growing up with an ill mother who I saw get mistreated by physicians, spent 2 minutes with them, didn't want to really get into answering questions because they had more patients waiting. I always said, I'm never going to be that kind of doctor. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of every day and just said, I treat every single person like they were my family. So, here's the thing. We set the practice up so that all the other providers aren't overburdened by a schedule either. There's other practices, they see 30, 40, 50 patients a day. And those people get burned out pretty quickly. Our practice, we see about 20. And so you're going to get 20 to 30 minutes. We're at this day and age, pretty long time to be with your doctor. But that's all of our providers, all of our visits. Yeah. We'll make it up on volume. And what I mean by that is we'll have 26 providers.
Right.
And so we'll see it's costlier. But in the end, we were able to do things like ancillaries. We make money on imaging. We make money on labs and things like that. And so that's something that the smaller practices can't do.
Yeah.
So the only way they can make more money is see more patients.
Yeah.
We can do it differently and do it better.
And again, comes back to your ability to put in the right team and empower them to take lead on the different areas of the practice that you needed them to.
And it's funny. If one of my managers came to me and said, "How do you want me to do this?" I could tell them how I want them to do it. But sometimes the way they did it, because I didn't tell them how to do it, they did it better than I would have done it because they're in it. My billing manager does billing all day. Well, she's going to make a better decision than I'm going to make.
Yeah.
And so I actually, by empowering them to make their own decisions and learn, I think the practice got better.
It's more fun that way too. I mean, we're sitting here with Gabrielle, who helps us with leading our services to our agents. And, when Gabrielle was hired, I certainly had ideas of how things should be done. And it started with, here's how I think it should be done. Go investigate this. Let me see it, implement it. Great. Now here's the problem. You got it figured out. and yeah, certainly she'll bring it to me and we'll talk about it. But at the end of the day, it makes it more fun to see somebody else take control and lead and be able to implement their creative ideas for something too.
I love it. The best entrepreneurs, when their managers come to them and say, "How would you want to do this?" Is just ask the question, "How would you do it?"
Right.
And then let them do it.
Yeah.
And then tell them it's okay. If it works, great. If it's not, I'm not going to blame you.
I laugh because the number of times that agents come into my office and I always laugh. Like my first instinct is like, agents are just going to ask for anything. They always do. And I always respond with, "Well, what do you think you should do?" And see how they react, because typically they'll be honest, or they'll say, "Well, we should do this, but, all right, you grew to a substantial single site practice. At some point you get approached or you go looking for private equity partners, and walk us through that process and how things changed. Sure. And then where your leadership went from there."
So we were approached in 2007 when we were about half the size we ultimately got to by a regional company called Capital Women's Care. They currently have 70 some offices in Northern Virginia, DC, and Baltimore. And at the time they were just trying to get bigger so they could achieve better economies of scale. And their goal was to reach out to the largest practices in every county in Maryland or in their region and say, "Hey, would you like to join us?" And so we were approached, and after about a year of due diligence, we decided to join them. But we became partners in the larger entity, but we still managed our Hagerstown location. They never interfered.
Right.
Every group that joined the company just still managed their locations. We still felt autonomy, but that allowed for economies of scale and better contracting. And the funds that came from that allowed us to supercharge our growth. So that was kind of exciting. But one of the things we never did was say, "We're not going to see new patients." As long as people were calling our office for an appointment, we were going to hire up and keep growing. But, that gets into something that's the love of yours, and you need more space.
Right.
You need more space to be able to do that. So during this process, we got into, how do we expand this office? How do we now build a new office? One of the things that the CEO of Capital Women's Care said to us, "You guys are doing really well out there in Hagerstown. You're one of the better managed offices we have." We have a huge gap in Carroll County, Maryland. It's a big geographic part of the map of Maryland. And when we go into United Healthcare or Blue Cross Blue Shield, we take a map with all the counties that we're represented in, colored out. And there's a major gap in the middle of Maryland and Carroll County. We just have not been able to get traction there. Would you guys be willing to go try it? And so we went to Carroll County, Maryland, and through a lot of work, we're able to get a few local physicians to join us and start a brand new practice, which then eventually grew to be the fourth largest of the 75 practices in Capital Women's Care. So we were able to start it from scratch and grow it. And of course, along the way, acquire real estate, have to do build outs, buy furniture, the whole bit. So you kind of learn through this process many times the value of real estate and how successful your practice is.
Well, with that, let's transition a little bit. You've built this great medical practice. You've now partnered with private equity. As you've grown, you've been instrumental in kind of evaluating the real estate as you go. At some point, you decide that you want to build a building, right? So talk us through that and what that has meant to your business as well as you personally and your partners in that.
Yeah, in 2008, we had 9,000 square feet at a medical center in Hagerstown, Maryland. Premier location, but we were landlocked. There was no other space available for us. And we got to the point where we couldn't hire anybody else if we wanted to. We realized we need to go out and look. So we hired some agents and said, "Find us bigger space. We need more than 9, probably need 15 because we're growing pretty rapidly here." No space existed that had the appropriate parking and handicap accessibility. So our second option was to go ahead and acquire some land and develop our own building, which is what we did. And again, Hagerstown, Maryland, it's a lot easier to do that than it is in the city. So again, Hagerstown plays an integral role in the success of my story. So we did. Just remember, it's 2008. It's the recession. Everything's going south, except maybe healthcare.
Yeah.
And so we decided we're going to build a building. And we started with an 18,000 square foot footprint that was going to fit on this property. And we're working with our contractors. And they said, hey, this is how much it's going to cost for you to build out and have a fully functional 18,000 square feet. And I said, how much would it cost to build a second floor on that building? Because I saw in the zoning, we can go up. And they said, well, the second floor is about an extra $1 million. It's just concrete and steel. It's the same size roof. You'll need another HVAC unit. You'll need an elevator, and you'll need a stairwell. So about $1 million. I said, an extra $1 million? And I said, what about a third floor? And they said, we knew you were going to ask that. Now you already have the HVAC unit, same roof.
Yeah.
You already have the elevator shaft and the stairwell. So really the third floor is only another $250,000.
It's kind of like you say, you don't turn down patience, you grow with the patience.
Yeah.
In real estate, you try not to turn down density. The more you can get on a piece of real estate, the more valuable it is.
So here you go. We have a practice here that's really currently in 9,000 square feet. And we decided to take a big bite and build 18. But now we're building 54,000 square feet, but rest of it being shell, hoping that we'll find tenants and eventually go into some of that other space. But my partners and I took a big leap, but we were also able to do it when no one else was building anything. So we were able to get good pricing. Contractors were looking for work.
Yeah.
So again, that was lucky also, in my opinion. But eventually my practice grew into 36,000 square feet. I think we currently lease 41,000 square foot of that 54,000 square foot building. And then the rest of it's filled by other practices. So the building's completely full. And in 2015, we started getting calls, just cold calls from all these investors looking to buy buildings. And kind of turned them away. We were really happy with this, the cash flowing building and all the tax advantages that I learned of over time from my accountant. And, we were really happy with controlling our own destiny. It was going really well. But then we get another call and it'd be a higher price, and then another one, and then another one. And in 2018, we got a call from a company called Montecito Medical Real Estate, and they just blew everybody else out of the water. I mean, the number was so big, we couldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
And interest rates were really low. So cap rates were low, which allowed me to really win. I mean, we just did the math and we talked to our accountants, and we just could, it's just an offer we couldn't afford.
And the great thing is you control the leasing there. So you're signing, I don't know if you had to, but you have a long-term lease or sign a new long-term lease, which creates the value.
Absolutely. So we were in a position where we had just kind of gotten a big, let's say, chunk of money for the practice from private equity. And then we just got a big chunk of money from the real estate investment company for our real estate. And I was able to stop delivering babies, stop working nights and weekends, stop doing surgery eventually, and then just spending much more time managing the practice, doing what I loved. And I love my patients, but I love managing the practice as well.
Going back to the early part of the conversation where you talked about knowing what you want in life. I often think when we say we want money, a lot of times what we also mean is freedom. And so when you're a doctor and you're having to see patients, you're tied to that schedule. And when you're managing and leading, I'm sure you felt a lot more free as well. And,
absolutely. The freedom to be able to say, I don't want to work nights and weekends anymore. I want to spend more time with my family. I want to take more vacation.
And now we could dive into a lot of these topics in more depth, and I'd like to do that again at some point. But now fast forwarding, you've kind of scratched the entrepreneurial itch by building a big practice, selling it to private equity. Now you've gotten into a real estate, which I'm sure energizes you in a similar way to building a business, and you create value for yourself and your family and your partners long term. And now I'll let you describe your current role in medicine, but you're now rolling into the next phase of your personal, professional life. And part of that is working with Hyatt Commercial as a healthcare consultant. Describe what that means to you and why you chose to go this direction at this point in your life.
Well, thank you for that question. A lot of things in my life weren't a plan that I had when I was 20. It just kind of falls into place. And I think real estate falls into place for me. I retired from medicine completely in June of 2024 and kind of looking for the next step. I always enjoyed the real estate part of my journey in terms of, let me go back. When I was a young kid, I used to read the Forbes magazine. When it was a magazine, I don't know if they even published the magazines anymore, but it was a magazine. And I particularly liked the the 500, Forbes 500.
The lists are still out there.
And I looked in there, and 20% of the billionaires of the world made their money in real estate. 20% made it in tech, 20% made it in oil, and so forth. And they had them all categorized. But I noticed that all the ones that made their money in other things invested their money in real estate. And it just seemed to be like all these people really have a central focus around real estate. Mm-hmm. And so it seems to be a builder of wealth to me. I think that imprinted on my head. Whenever I had excess income, my wife and I would buy real estate with it. And I love the idea of putting 20% down, having a tenant pay off the other 80% for you. Yeah. And if you do it on a 20-year mortgage, like I did with most of my properties, it's a guaranteed 400% return.
Yeah.
With tax benefits, major tax benefits. So we did that a lot. We bought a lot of real estate along the way. So you learn a lot along the way, the tax implications, the just management implications, how they appreciate, et cetera. So real estate was natural to me. Then, of course, in my practice, real estate was not part of the plan, but to grow, we had to deal with it. I had a conversation with a physician a long time ago that I really respect as a primary care physician who I referred all my patients to because I really thought he was the best doctor in town, best practice in town. And all these patients, after a while, started coming to me and saying, hey, they're not taking new patients. So I called him and I said, why aren't you taking new patients? He goes, we ran out of space. And I said, well, get some more space. He goes, no, we love our space. We're happy the way we are. I said, so wait a second. If you hired another doctor, that you would be on call less, right? You would be on call instead of every 6th night, you'd be on call every 7th night, which is a dozen less times you're not with your family. And then you'd be profitable on that physician with a full schedule. So you'd make more money. So what you're saying is you love your space so much that you're willing to work harder and make less money for it? And he didn't answer the question, but he kind of dawned on him, like, what's going on here? And another thing that someone told me, a wise man told me, if you're not growing, you're dying. And what happens is that practice stopped growing. And within a few years, they'd all split up. And now they're all in different practices. And they had a really great thing and they blew it because they weren't willing to continue to grow and make the tough decision. Yeah. Real estate is sometimes the end game for a lot of practices. We're filled out of practice. We filled out of real estate. We're done. Yeah. Don't be that way. There's always a way to get more real estate. I know it's not your expertise, but hire people that are. But I ended up becoming pretty knowledgeable about that, helped develop other real estate, both in Carroll County, also in my hometown. And I thought, this is something I could do to help physicians and practices.
And to that point, just some of the kind of early discussions that we've had as you've come on board with us is a lot of doctor practices, to your point, get so focused on just providing great medicine and service to their patients. They hit a wall because of their real estate and they don't totally understand the financial or the business benefit, or maybe they understand it, but nobody's actually sat down and laid it out on a table to them. And the discussions that you've had with some of our clients where you sit down and go, you don't necessarily need to hire another doctor. You need to hire 2 physician assistants or practitioners or what your expertise there, where they go, all right, so we can grow by 20% space-wise, but we can grow by 40% on revenues because that's where I've seen just the eyes pop wide open when you're speaking to people.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to, I guess my advantage is that I understand the real estate side, but I also understand the medical side. And I think a lot of the real estate brokers can't really go into a practice and say, let me look at your business model here and tell you why this is a win. And I can do both. So I can come in and say, okay, I've run a medical practice. I've looked at profit loss statements. I kind of have a good idea what the revenue is per provider and so forth. Let me make this decision a little easier for you. And sometimes I'm sure the decision will be, no, you shouldn't grow. But for the most part, you should. I think almost every business that's really doing well should grow.
Yeah, continue to grow.
And I think that's true for Walmart. Yeah. That's true for us. Walmart's never going to have a sign in the front door saying, hey, I'm not taking new clients. Yeah. No more shoppers allowed. It doesn't happen. You just keep growing. You get bigger. And sometimes that leads to positive things.
Well, for fear of making this kind of a commercial for Hyatt, which it's not meant to be, let me transition to discussion a little bit just to more about you personally, and we'll wrap it up here in a couple of minutes. But what does your day-to-day lifestyle look like now? As you've retired from medicine, you've got kids that are getting into their professional career, you've got a lot more time on your hands. What does your schedule look like? How do you keep yourself busy now? What gets you out of bed and excited every day?
I have so many friends that say, man, if I retired, I don't know what I'd do with all my time. And I say to those folks, you'll figure it out and it'll be more fun than what you do now. But people are really concerned I'm just going to be bored. And I don't find that to be the case. When I was waking up really early in the morning to go round on my patients before my surgeries, and then going back to the office to do things, and then going back to see all my post-op patients at night before I came home, my kids were already in bed because I didn't get home till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. One of the things I really always dreamed about was having time, controlling my schedule. And I talked to my insurance agent or I talked to other professionals, and they would always be going to the golf tournament or this or that. And I would say, how'd you do that? They're like, well, this opportunity came up and I rescheduled everything I had. Yeah. But I can't reschedule 5 surgeries. Yeah. I can't reschedule my call shift where people are going to be in labor and I'm going to be stuck at the hospital. I can't really schedule 30 patients because I really inconvenience their lives. And if I do it often enough, they'll stop coming to see me because I'm always canceling on them. Yeah. And so my schedule always controlled me. But now I control my schedule. And that's wonderful. I try not to schedule things too early in the morning. I've always dreamed this concept of not waking up to an alarm clock. Yeah. Waking up refreshed every day. So I do those kind of things. I have my week. And by the way, all this stuff that I have to do, like pay bills and just little things on your to-do list, even little household chores and things like that, that always happened in evenings and weekends for me because that's the only time I had to do it. Yeah. Now it happens during the daytime. Yeah. And I have my evenings and weekends to myself. Yeah. I never have to say, no, I can't make it to a child's event. My youngest is in college now. Yeah. We're going to be at every parent's weekend. We're going to be at football games. We're going to be prioritizing our children. But what I love about real estate is it is something that you do control your schedule to some degree. Not always, but for the most part, I can schedule around my other functions.
Well, first of all, congratulations that you've created this life for yourself. It's a great story. We could dig into a lot of those things in more detail, and maybe we'll come back and do that someday. I would ask the question for the doctors that are up and coming and aspire to get to where you are, what's your advice for them? But that would take a lot of time, I recognize. And so instead of doing that, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it email? Is it a phone call? Is it coming through Hyatt? If somebody wants to reach out and say, hey, I'm entrepreneurial, but I'm a medical provider. Like, how do I bridge the gap? Is that something you're open to discussions?
Absolutely. I think my email is mkothari@hyattcommercial.com. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can honestly tell you, I reach out to every single person that reaches out to me. Those are two great ways to connect with me. And then if it looks like we should talk, I'll be more than happy to give a call.
Well, that's very gracious of you. And that's certainly something I always find that like very few people don't want to help others. They just don't have the time. And so I always tell people that are interested in real estate, like, just keep asking me for help. Keep reaching out. If I ignore you for a day, it's not because I don't want to help. It's because I'm just busy with something else. So just stay in touch. And
I know that a lot of mentors really helped me along the way when I had tough decisions to make. And I'm thankful for that.
Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. It's great to have you on the team and spending your time doing this today, and look forward to a lot of successes going forward.
I'm honored to be on your team and look forward to the future.
Cool.
Thank you.
Great job. Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for tuning in to Coffee Talk with Justin Mullen. Topics on leadership, culture, CRE, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial. Until next time.